the wins and losses on the trip happened in my head. That was really a takeaway from this is of all the hard things I did, a lot of the hardest things were mental and not physical. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Grit Meets Growth podcast, where we bring you inspiration and insights focused on getting uncomfortable, making things happen, and creating a magnetic life. If you enjoy the messages you're hearing here, please leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of the podcast. With that, let's get after it. This is the back from Nepal conversation.
Really? This is the back from Nepal conversation. Like we're gonna be all like monotone with it.
Yeah.
Dude, get excited, man.
I'm gonna tell you right now, man. It was I had expectations for the trip. Thought I knew what I was getting myself into, thought I knew where I was going, and then everything got blown up in a really good way. It was an awesome trip. Absolutely an awesome trip. You said something as we were pre-gaming this a little bit. You get out what you put in. Mm-hmm. And this trip, there was a lot of that in this trip. There was a lot of training and a lot of prep that I'll talk about a little bit as we dive into this, but we put a lot into this trip, getting ready for it, and we got every ounce back out.
That's awesome. Well, like Mike Tyson always says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your plan changed multiple times through the course of your trip. And, you can't really plan for everything. So I'm looking forward to hearing about it today.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to jump back for a second as to how this even became a thing.
Okay.
Because it a lot of it ties back to this podcast and conversations we had here about no excuses and diving into the uncomfortable. This is an excuse my buddies have been taking now for like 5 years. This trip, right, has been something that they've been doing. Every time they come back, they've got stories about, hey, we went to Nepal. Here's what we saw. And I've always wanted to do this trip, and I've always had excuses as to why I couldn't, shouldn't, and wouldn't end up doing this trip. And over the last year, this kind of journey that we've been on, the no excuses journey and the get uncomfortable journey, both of those have been topics and subjects of a lot of conversations that really played into this. And then on top of that, Jesse Itzler has talked about the Misogi. And this was my Misogi for the year. I made the decision early in the year. This was going to be the one thing I was going to do this year that was really going to define the year, and made the decision to go. That's one of the things that was huge about this is once I drew the line in the sand and said, I'm going to Nepal, now the dominoes started to fall into place, and everything that I needed to make this trip a reality started to fall into place. It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't made that initial decision. Okay, I'm going. I'm doing this year. No more excuses. I'm going to do this. Then everything started to fall into place. And so that's when things got cool. And it opened up a lot of doors for where this was going to go. You and I did 75 hard. That was the beginning of the physical prep for this trip. I went into the trip thinking I knew exactly what I needed to be ready for physically. Encountered some things that were not on that list that still were fantastic. I go back to the Misogi. One of the things that comes up when you talk about the Misogi experience, the Misogi challenge that Jesse Itzler does, is it needs to be something you're not sure you can actually do. And that's what this was, because I knew it was going to be a tough trip. I knew there was going to be a lot of unexpected stuff that was going to come along with it. I knew the training was going to be hard, and it was. But the result coming back from it now, and I got back on Friday. So we're recording this on Monday in the afternoon. I got back Friday night at midnight. And so I'm still kind of in the download moment where I'm trying to figure out everything that I learned from this.
Yeah. Enough. Like, stop teasing us already. Like, jump into this.
It's 30 hours to get there. So somebody had told me early on, the travel is going to be one of the hardest parts. And they were absolutely right. It was 30 hours to get there. Started from Minneapolis to Dallas, layover in Dallas, then from Dallas to Qatar, and a layover in Qatar, and then from Qatar to Kathmandu, and we get into Nepal. We're in Kathmandu. Now we hop into one more plane when we get to Kathmandu. We're up in the air for about 15 minutes, and then it's a 3-hour Jeep ride to where we're going to get on trail and we're going to start to hike. So
is that 15-minute flight just like over a mountain over the range, or
yeah, absolutely,
just to get you over the mountain?
Absolutely. In a prop plane. There's probably 40 people in the plane, up and over the mountain into another one of the cities in Nepal. And then it's the Jeep ride to get to where we're going to go. And we had a place that we stayed that night, and next morning we're on the trail. And the cool thing about this trip was, when you get to Nepal and you plan a trip to Nepal, a lot of people go Annapurna Trail or they go to Everest. Like, there's some very touristy, popular places people go. Everybody wants to go see Everest, and Annapurna Trail takes you into the Himalayas, into some big mountains. And because of the group of guys I was with and kind of the itinerary that we had, instead of going north toward the Himalayas and toward that China border, we went south. So we ended up in southern Nepal, in a place that people rarely go. It's not on the tourist list, but we had some really good guides who took us into an area of Nepal that is rarely visited, and we got to see some cool stuff. So it was a lot more jungly, I would say, a lot more rice paddies and stuff like that. We still got really good elevation. The second day we tackled a lot of elevation, and we went high, and it definitely tested the limits physically as to what you're able to do. There were a couple of spots where we couldn't get water. Most of the trip we had access to water. There were a couple of spots where our guides told us, where we're going, you're not going to have water, so you have to carry what you're going to drink. And so we did, and water's heavy. That was one of the tests, is water will make a backpack heavy, especially, a liter of water weighs about 2 pounds. So now you're carrying 4 liters of water, which adds 8 pounds to your backpack, and you're up and down. But I think one of the highlights of the trip was being completely off the grid. From the time I left Doha in Qatar into Kathmandu and then onto the trail, I had like no cell service. So I couldn't get text messages out. I couldn't get phone messages out. One of my buddies had a GPS where I could shoot a text message out, and a couple other guys had intermittent service throughout the trip. I didn't have any, and I kind of did that on purpose. So this was 8 days of the quietest I've ever been, with no distractions, no.
Awesome.
It was phenomenal, man. Like, you want to make room to get in your own head. This was it. And so we took the trip that way, and it was quiet, and it was awesome. It was 5 days on the trail trekking. And so we're on these dirt roads, and we had beautiful weather, but like sometimes the unexpected happens. And we talk about that, the unexpected and the uncomfortable. I went into this thinking, I'm going to need clothing for cooler weather. There might be some mosquitoes. There was an outbreak in Kathmandu that I was kind of tracking, of like a mosquito-borne illness outbreak that I was making sure I was covered for. I never thought about sunscreen. And so we got there. Temps the first couple of days were like 87 and 85. So we're trekking, we're climbing into these higher altitudes, and the sun is full on. Like, it would be cloudy in the morning and foggy for about the first 2 hours, and then that would burn off, and the rest of the day was full sun. And so there was definitely a pretty good sunburn by the end of the trip.
You don't look burned at all.
No, it was my arms. It was actually my arms and the backs of my ears that took the most heat. So again, the unexpected, the backs of my ears. The other thing that was interesting about it when you were on the trails, you're hiking on a road basically. And that's what we hiked on. We hiked on roads. We camp in tents at night. They had a good setup for that. But every once in a while, one of the things we wanted to do was be able to have conversations with some of the locals. Like I was really curious about talking to people who live there. So the Nepali people, especially where we were, hospitality was huge. So we would dive down into some of these spots. We'd go to the houses and our guides would say, hey, my friend from America is here. He'd like to say hi, basically. And we'd have conversations with people. And the level of hospitality that these people gave us, they don't know us from Adam. Weird guys coming into their village. They'd take out the rugs, they'd get out their homemade brooms, and they'd sweep off the mud floor for us. They'd get out the rugs, they'd get out the mats, they'd get out the little seats for us to sit on, and we could just have conversations with them. And they were so joyful and so nice and took us in like we were relatives.
That's the way it is before cell phones, man. People actually sat down and talked to each other.
So the funny thing about that is everybody there has a cell phone. Like we're remote. We're super remote. Every one of the houses, and these are like mud houses. Like there's one room mud house with a pen on the outside for the goats or the couple of cows that they have, or the chickens, right? Top of every one of these mud houses is a tin roof. And on the tin roof is a solar panel. And the solar panel gives them enough to keep a cell phone running. Every once in a while, you'd walk past a house and you'd hear video that I'm sure was TikTok, because the kids love their TikTok. I mean, it's global apparently. So, which was funny and disappointing at the same time, because I kind of feel like this part of the world would be better off maybe without TikTok. But it's the nature of the beast. But my guide would say, hey, do you want to go down to that house? Well, down to that house or up to that house was usually 150 feet, either 45 degrees up or 45 degrees down. So you're going up and down these goat trails that are about 8 inches wide. They're mud, they're rocks. And my footing and my Nepali guide's footing is completely different. Like he's running up and down these trails like he's a deer. And I'm running up and down these trails like I'm an elephant. Like I'm trying to like keep from going butt over tea kettle up and down these trails. And he'd be like, you want to go up there? Yeah, let's go up there and let's see if we can get up there. He's done. He's up there and he's waiting for me. Mr. John, can you make it? I'm like, yeah, I can make it. And he's like half laughing at me as he's asking. So, but there were a couple of moments. There was a moment where he wanted to take a shortcut kind of through the jungle to get from point A to point B. And he asked about the shortcut. I'm like, yeah, let's take a shortcut. Shortcut was a path about 8 to 12 inches wide with 40 to 50 foot drop to my left, and then 40 to 50 feet up to my right. And I didn't realize I was on the 40 to 50 foot drop until I was about 3 steps into it. And then I looked down. And one of my buddies that was behind me, he saw me look down and he said, you stopped and you looked absolutely terrified. And then you just kept right on going. And that's what it was. Like, this was one of those trips where you had to kind of take your fear and just pocket it and be, yeah.
So it wasn't just the physical challenges, which you haven't, I mean, sure, climbing up and down, has those. And I'm sure you had those moments where your heart is just pounding out of your chest. As much as you prepared for it, it's still not the same when you're at elevation.
No.
And then the mental piece of it. So how did you deal with that? What kept you going?
It was a choice. The mental piece was harder than the physical every single day. So we'll take that drop, right? I'm afraid of heights. And I knew that going into this trip. I really felt that when I looked down and there's a 50-foot drop straight down. And I'm like, okay, I got to just keep going. There was no going backward at that point. And so it was
But how did you keep the what if out of your mind?
You had to, like, it flashed for just a second. And then you had to get into the perspective of it's not an option. You need to just keep going. And I don't have a good answer for how I shut it off necessarily, but it was just one foot in front of the other, and keep going regardless of the fear. There was a point where I walked into the bathroom, and the bathroom in one of these villages is an outhouse, basically, we'll call it, with a hole in the floor that you would aim at. Like there's no toilet where we were, right? I walk into this outhouse, and in the top right corner of the outhouse is the biggest spider I've ever seen. Like, and he's just hanging out in his web up in the top corner, and he looks nasty. But I have to go to the bathroom. And this is my only option. If I'm going to go to the bathroom, this is where I have to go. And again, you had to figure out how to turn it off. Like the fear didn't go away. The spider in the corner, I'm afraid of it the whole time. And I don't like spiders. Like it's just not on my list. The 50-foot drop, I'm afraid of that the whole time. But you had to figure out how to just turn it off and keep moving and not get stuck. And it was a choice of, I need to do this because it's what I need to do. So I don't have a good, like, here's how I flipped the switch, other than I decided I had to flip the switch.
Yeah.
So yeah. What do you do in situations like that? How do you flip the switch?
Yeah, John, I've been in those situations as well. And I think the best thing you can do is focus on the outcome, right? Not getting hung up around the surroundings, but really focusing on what you're there to do. Right? What is that mission statement? What is that? What is my mission? What am I here for? I think it's got to be something that's a little bit bigger than us in order to overcome those situations. Because it is easy. It's I've done some of the aerial, just thinking back to doing some of the aerial tests, right, where you're harnessed in, right, and you're walking across these planks and these ropes that are swinging and your legs are shaking. Like just focusing on the end, right? Because it's easy to get in our head and go, I can't do this, right? My body's not allowing me to do this. I've talked about it before. Your body can do anything, right? It's the mind that gets in the way. And I think just really allowing my mind to focus on the outcome and where I'm getting to, whether that's the other side of the rope, whether that's, in your instance, the house that I'm trying to get to, the fact that the outhouse and I've got to get this done. What's my outcome? Right. Got to get my job done. And I got to get out of here.
That's it. That's exactly what it was. There were moments where it just had to get done, and you wanted to get it done so you could move on to the next thing. There was plenty of that.
Right.
The learning on the other side of that is I'm stronger than I think I am. I'm stronger than I give myself credit for. I'm capable of things that I didn't think I was capable of. That was a highlight of this entire trip, from the training to get ready for it. And that's something not to understate. The preparation to get ready for this was huge. I mean, you and I talked about it, 5 a.m. on the hill. There was a lot of work that went into getting ready for this trip. Those things made the trip pleasant and made it possible, really. But from the training to the trip itself to coming home and unpacking in my head everything that we had gone through and everything we did, the preparation was huge. But the wins and losses on the trip happened in my head. That was really a takeaway from this, is of all the hard things I did, a lot of the hardest things were mental and not physical.
It's usually the case. I mean, there's a physical aspect to a lot of the things, right? There was a physical aspect to 75 hard. There was a physical aspect this year to the Murph. But ultimately, it's a mental war that we're fighting in those situations. It's the mental toughness, right? 75 hard is really an exercise in mental toughness. This Nepal trip for you, as you just said, is really an exercise in mental toughness. Yes, you have to fight through the physical challenges, but the mental piece is what allows you to succeed in those physical challenges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the other takeaways I had from this is American culture. We chase a lot of stuff. We chase money, we chase fame, we chase a lot of things, right? Not always aligned with our purpose. We're not always aligned with what really matters. These people, when we got up into the mountains and we started having conversations with people and hanging out with people who live in the mountains, they don't have much. And it was interesting. They don't have much material wise. From a material perspective, we would call them poor. We would say this is poverty. The interesting thing about this was their level of joy and happiness and contentment was much higher than mine. Like if I really break it down, and specifically the contentment side, they're very content. They work really hard to live the lives that they have. These are not easy lives. They farm fields. They live in rough conditions. There's nothing soft or cushy about where these people live. But when you start to have conversations with them, there's a lot of joy and a lot of contentment in there that I found myself a little bit jealous of from time to time. And that was one of the things that I want to bring back from this trip is how do I find more contentment in my life? And how do I let go of some of those material things that I want to chase, or I want to accomplish this. I want to do this. I want to have this. What if you were a little bit more present and you could be a little bit more content? And that's something I'll wrestle with for a while, trying to figure that out. I don't have it figured out yet. I'm going to figure it out. So
sure. Still processing that, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you still got a little jet lag going on, I'm sure. Do you even know what time it really is?
It's 1:41. Only because I looked at the clock. The travel was definitely one of the biggest challenges. Like once we got out into the field, it was easier to acclimate. Other than the roosters that would crow at like 3:30 in the morning as your alarm clock. But you got used to that pretty fast, and you were so tired by the end of the day hiking that you could have slept through just about anything. But that trip there and then the trip home to get back home, that was one of the bigger challenges. And it was interesting. One of the other things that hit for me on this trip was family, because it's easy to take family for granted when you're around them all the time. And it's easy for family to be a source of friction sometimes because you're around them. You're so close to them all the time. Then when you're separated, that whole absence makes the heart grow fonder thing. By the time I was landing in Minneapolis on Friday night, getting home, it was late. I was tired, but I was excited to be home. I was excited to see Christina, excited to see my kids the next morning when they woke up. I mean, that definitely hit in a way that I didn't expect as well. So.
Well, and also the opportunity to share the experiences that you had with them.
Yeah.
Right. You obviously got joy from the experiences that you had and being able to share them. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
It gives us great joy when we have that opportunity to be able to do that. It's awesome. So, did you achieve everything you set out to achieve on this trip? Personally?
Absolutely.
And more.
Absolutely. And I achieved a lot of things. I go back to the very beginning. The no excuses and get uncomfortable. it would have been easier to make excuses, and it would have been easier to stay comfortable and not do the work to prep, not do the work to go, not do the work to be there. What I got out of this trip far surpassed what I expected, what I wanted, what I had planned in my head. It was bigger and more impactful than what I anticipated. And so the example I've been able to set for my kids, Riley has made comments about it, specifically, having your kids watch you get ready for something like this and then go do it. We talked a little bit in the last episode about legacy. Like, what do you want to leave from this trip? That was a big thing, and I accomplished that for sure. So,
anything you would have done differently?
I think I would have trained a little bit more. Like, I felt very well trained when I left. It was interesting. I trained with about 20, 25 pounds in my backpack. Once you were on trail and you put water in and the last of the last things you were going to put in the backpack, I was at 35 or 40 pounds on any given day. I would have trained more like that. I would have added a little extra weight in the beginning just to prep a little bit more. That would have been a big piece of that. That's about the only thing. And then maybe bring some sunscreen with, it's all the things you don't anticipate until you get there. But that's where grit comes in too, is you have to show up and yeah.
Were you overpacked at all?
Yes, absolutely. There were definitely things in my pack that I would not have needed to bring with, where I could have cut weight that way. Somebody brought up to me before we left, don't pack your fears. And I thought I did a pretty good job of not packing my fears, but there were a few things in that bag that I packed because I'm like, well, what if this happens? Or what if that happens? You want to be prepared for sure, but you don't have to, you and I have talked about this in past episodes. You don't have to be prepared for everything that could possibly happen. I over prepared and overpacked, I should say. There were things that if I go back, when I go back, I won't bring with the second time around. So
yeah, I even on motorcycle trips, right? I pack and then I cut it in half. And then I cut it in half again. And the reality is there are still times, even after that exercise, that I come home with stuff that I didn't use or didn't wear.
The funniest thing that I overpacked was food. Like we had a team who cooked breakfast and dinner for us every day. And then they provided a lunch for us, like a trail lunch. Based on that, I could have not packed any food and I would have probably been pretty well off. But I was like, I remember in the prep and the planning, I'm like, well, what if I don't like their food? Or what if I get hungry on the trail? Or what if I want a granola bar? Or what if, like, all of that stuff that races through your head? I could have done this trip and not packed any extra food and I would have been just fine. But I wanted to be somewhat comfortable. So that extra pound bag of jerky that I threw in my bag, like when I finally pulled it out, it was good. I wouldn't have needed it though. So that's the balance between I want to be comfortable and I want to not carry extra weight. So a lot of it was finding balance between the two.
Right.
Yeah. Overall though, life-changing experience, absolute life-changing experience to get out of the States, to turn off the noise, to not have, like, we talk about turning off the noise all the time. Like, don't watch the news, don't watch social. When all of a sudden I didn't have access to any of it, it got quiet and I could hear myself think for like 8 days straight. I could hear myself think. And now coming back, one of my fears is, I could see it even when I got back. I'm like, I kind of craved the noise because I'm used to it. And so I'm trying to like not let myself fall back into bad habits and old traps. So.
Yeah. And how are you going to do that then? How are you going to keep from doing that?
It's a matter of being intentional and setting up boundaries and catching the intentional thought part is that moment where I walk into the living room and out of habit, I'm going to turn on the TV and just flip channels blindly because I'm like, I wonder what's on TV. Well, I got 5 other things I could do that would be more fruitful than flipping channels and watching, I don't know, something stupid on Discovery Channel, or what add to your list. I don't have to turn on the news. I don't have to flip to Facebook or Instagram. Like I can calm that back, but I have to catch myself when I do fall into those old habits. Yeah, you can have a little bit of that, but it doesn't have to be a half hour of it. You know what I mean? So
Just be in the present, man. Be in the present.
This trip was very present. There was no way not to be in the present just because of where you were and what you were doing. You couldn't escape it. Here, there's a lot of ways to escape the present. And I think we do that sometimes as a Band-Aid or a way to protect ourselves from things we don't have to think about. So I'm going to escape.
It's a way to be comfortable, man. It's a way to get comfortable. Run away from that stuff and go to a place of comfort. You know, I can get on social media and I can look at all the other people and what they're doing and the lives that they're living. And I don't feel so bad about, you know, we as individuals don't feel so bad about how we're operating. It's a dangerous slope, man. Really need to pull away from that and live your life regardless of what everybody else is doing. Live your life.
That's what this trip was. This was an opportunity to live life and have an adventure rather than watch other people do it on Instagram. This was my opportunity to live my adventure, to go out and do my thing and live it versus watch it. So
right on.
Yeah, it was a good trip.
Live your life, man.
I want you to challenge me though, moving forward, just in our personal conversations. Challenge me to not settle back into bad habits. That's my biggest fear, is not settle back into bad habits. And also having this trip out in front of me was a good goal. It gave me something to work for. It gave me a reason to get out of bed and onto the hill at 5 a.m., to go to the gym, to eat well, like all of those things. I got to figure out what my next thing is going to be. Like, what's that next goal so that I have something to move toward, to stay where I'm at and grow, keep growing. So that's challenge me on that. That's my ask of you, is just continue to challenge me on that and what's next. So
right on.
Yeah.
Awesome. Challenge your friends, man. Get out each other, right? Hold each other accountable. That's what good friendship's all about.
Yeah.
Make it a great day and get after it.
See you later, man.
See ya.
That wraps it up for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the Grit Meets Growth tribe. And thanks for growing along with us and being part of this journey together. If you know someone who needs to hear the conversation we had today, please share it. If you got something out of this conversation, please leave us a review. And finally, if you want to make sure you don't miss future episodes, just remember to subscribe. We're thankful for each and every one of you. And as my co-host and good friend Chris Cathers always says, make it a great day.